Just, yeah, right. So let me get to the page, and then this is where again, I said this last time. This is always the fun part where I say, okay, I wonder if anybody's watching or if anybody's if we're really live yet.
Do they have comments to ask questions, or is it just completely one
No,
way?
and that's why I have this computer here as well, and I forgot to explain that because I have a computer right in front of me that I'm watching you. You and I are side by side on it, and then so I have the laptop over here open to the Facebook stream, so I can read questions as they're asked.
Oh, all right.
So yeah, it looks like we are for real. So let me close this box here, and we'll give some people a few minutes to catch up. We've got a couple people watching already. So yeah, so what is New Orleans looking like? I just read that they changed the bar code, the bar no to go booze. I saw an article just posted a little bit ago about that. What is the political climate down there on the?
I think it's very similar to the rest of the country. So you have crowds of younger people.
Yeah.
Who are, regardless of whether bars are open or whether it's the Airbnb next to my house, they are, gathering en masse and getting drunk together. And of course, drunk people aren't really that great at social distancing.
Right, absolutely. Do you live in the quarter?
That's a lot of what it is. People are coming from outside of Louisiana, from the surrounding areas, and partying here.
Do you live near the French Quarter? Do you live near your shops? Or
I live in the Treme.
Oh, okay.
Not far from the French Quarter. I used to live in the French Quarter for a little over a year. But we bought a house here in the Treme, so it's still in walking distance.
Oh, you froze up a little bit. I think it'll. Oh, do we lose you? Oh, there you are. You're back. You froze up for a second. So I learned.
You froze too.
Okay, I learned a really valuable lesson. One of the first times. The first time I ever visited New Orleans was in November, and we walked everywhere we went, and it was awesome. We walked from the quarter up to Magazine Street. We walked to the stadium to go to the Denver Bronco game, and it was awesome. And then I went back in March, and I walked everywhere I went because it was still nice weather. Well, and I went with my wife and my kid then, and then I went back by myself that August and decided, I can walk by myself. I can make it to Magazine Street. Oh man, a big fat guy walking that's not used to humidity. I was a mess. About 6 blocks outside of the quarter, I realized I'm not walking anywhere. It's too hot, too muggy.
It's a bit of a trek. Quarter for sure.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we've got a good group started watching. So I'll go ahead and introduce today's guest. Brian Cain came to me as a recommendation through my friend Marita, who was on week 1 or 2, and everybody who's watched this before knows my how much I love that woman and how much she's helped me in my fun journeys and my adventure into magic. And she could not say enough nice things about Brian. I've visited both of Brian's stores before I ever met Brian. Brian is part owner of Hex and Omen in New Orleans and in Salem, Massachusetts. Brian just published a book called Initiation into Witchcraft, which I've got some spates and things noted I want to talk about. So Brian, I thanks for coming on, and just kind of, if you'll give everybody kind of a quick Brian Cain 101. How did you come to get to be on this silly show from the day you were born to being on this silly show?
That's a long story. Well, I suppose witchcraft is the story that leads me here. When I was about 13 years old, I had a friend in elementary school. I do have dogs, everyone who doesn't know me, so if they start barking, we can't control it because they own the house.
Of course.
We used to read his mother's books. She was into witchcraft. And so, obviously, she didn't tell us she was into witchcraft, but they were around the house, and it would be things like gypsy magic or books of spells. And I guess I just didn't really question where they came from. I sort of just explored them with him. It was almost like I thought they were his books. So we sort of would tend to play around with what was going on in there. So it became kind of a natural curiosity. And I'd always been sort of interested in mythology and fantasy world stuff, probably most of my childhood. About the age of 15 is when it really became a thing, though. I purchased a book called Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft. And in that book,
Is that the purple cover? Is that a purple cover?
It's blue.
Okay.
It's blue.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I started reading that book, of course, not knowing anything about, how much substance there really was going to be out there. I thought of witchcraft at that time as spells,
Right.
And I started reading this book, and Mr. Buckland started talking about how witchcraft was a religion, and that he was a member of the witchcraft priesthood, and that witches, in fact, worshipped not the devil, but a horned god, and primarily also a goddess. And it was the conversation about the goddess that really intrigued me, because it sort of struck a chord with me. I remember that was the big contribution of that book for me. In my 15-year-old brain, the concept that anyone in the 90s or whatever, I guess, was worshiping a goddess, was just sort of kind of eye-opening. In fact, at that point in time for me, just the thought of anyone worshiping a goddess, and the idea that there were these civilizations that existed for thousands of years where they thought of God as a woman, that this was just a part of other human beings' realities, so it was sort of eye-opening for me, and that began my quest. And I just started reading anything I could get my hands on, and I started practicing as best I could the religion of witchcraft. And about the time I hit 17, I met my first teacher in witchcraft, and began working with her, and became a young priest in a form of witchcraft at the age of 19.
And where were you? Where did you grow up? Where were you?
I was in Spokane, Washington.
Okay.
So I spent many, many years practicing the craft sort of outside of any kind of public life. So I was in a few different covens, and I worked with several witches, many of them who I'm friends with still to this day. And it became the most important thing in my life, my biggest focus, my biggest passion. But I was not on the internet. I was not plugged into any of these things. I'm one of those people that didn't start driving until my mid-20s. I didn't get a cell phone until my 30s. I always was just sort of behind in technology. So the internet wasn't until my mid-20s I got on there, but I didn't really, I wasn't involved in the
Looks like we've gotten a little bit of a lockup again. So hopefully that fixes itself here shortly.
Or yours. So I could try switching if it keeps being a problem. It's hard saying here because the weather are we good again?
Yeah, we're good.
Weather seems good here, but when we do have storms and stuff, you can get some screwball things in New Orleans.
And I'm getting a thing that pops up that says my internet connection is unstable, so I don't know what that means. I've never had that. It happened last week, and it's never happened before, so we'll muster through. So I'm sorry for the interruption. So you're late on technology, you're late on the internet, you're a late adapter to...
The point in telling that whole story is just that I wasn't plugged into the broader world of witchcraft at all.
Yeah.
So I was very isolated. It was the covens that I worked with and the people that I knew locally. That was witchcraft to me. Didn't have any plugins in the books that I was reading. Obviously, Washington, like anywhere else, had its own little communities. So it had its own pagan pride group, and it had other covens. And so, I was involved in that community, but I really wasn't connected to anything beyond books outside of that. So fast forward, I decided that I wanted a change of pace, and I decided I was going to move to New Orleans. That's the place that I decided to move to. At this point in time, I am on Facebook. I have plugged into the world. I wasn't really in the world of witchcraft, though. I wasn't on any groups or anything like that at that point in time. I was just sort of putting my toes in the water. A friend of mine, a priestess from Washington, had sent me some information regarding a man who called himself a warlock named Christian Day. And I loathed the word warlock, and she knew that. I didn't really like the usage of the word. And I don't know what actually led her to send it to me, but she did. And there was something intriguing about him because I knew a lot about Laurie Cabot and the Salem community, just from reading books. And he kind of like had that vibe, but it was like, I wasn't really sure what I was looking at. I was like, okay, he kind of seems like a Cabot. He kind of seems like he's like Church of Satan. He's calling himself a warlock. I don't know why, but I ended up messaging him and asking him, you know, what are you for?
Yeah.
Basically, like, what are you? What am I looking at? And it just started a conversation on there, and we started becoming, I guess, Facebook friends or whatever. And
so, Brian, I got to interrupt real quick. That may be the worst pickup line I've ever heard. Is "What are you?"
Wasn't
I know, but the
I didn't have any designs on that sort of thing. We sort of became friends, and obviously, like, you know, I wasn't really about like trying to start some sort of Facebook affair.
Right.
Regardless of what's going on, whatever was going on in Christian's mind. But he was living at the time between Salem and New Orleans, and I had already decided that I wanted to move to New Orleans, so he became a quick resource to ask questions about New Orleans. You know, and my reasons for picking, I might have band come by now.
Oh, perfect. It wouldn't be an interview.
I can hear the trumpets. I don't know how loud it'll get.
It wouldn't be an interview from New Orleans without a band.
Just start jamming out. So
All right, I don't know why this keeps freezing up, but let me just refresh this and see what. All right, we're back. Sorry about it. I don't know what this is.
It's probably some kind of ping you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So I wanted to move to a magical place, and the two most magical places in the United States that you would think of in witchcraft is Salem, Massachusetts, or New Orleans. And I already lived in a place with winter, and I was really sick of winter. So I wanted to get away from the snow. I wanted an exciting, exotic adventure. I didn't want to just like move somewhere that was like mirroring home, basically. So I was more in love with the idea of New Orleans. Now, obviously, it was all fantasy for me at that time because it was very different in my mind than how it actually is. But so I ended up moving here, which is where I eventually met Christian in person, and we did end up dating, and, you know, fast forward, ended up getting married and all that sort of thing. So I was kind of, in a sense, just by virtue of the fact that he was already a public witch, sort of thrown into the spotlight a little bit then and there, you know, by that happening. I had decided that I wanted to seek initiation into you know, I'd been into the witchcraft priesthood, the witchcraft religion, since my early teens. And I decided that I wanted to pursue that further by entering into a lineage that had an older succession, I guess you could say. And so I looked into the two oldest sects of the craft, which were Gardnerian and Alexandrian. And of course, at this time, I'd met a lot of people, you know. So I did end up becoming an initiate of Alexandrian witchcraft. Obviously, I have some Gardnerian lineage because there's upline within that lineage that were Gardnerian, because there's a lot of cross-pollination these days. It's kind of like, if you were going to compare it to Catholicism, how you might have like Jesuits and Franciscans. You know, they're like different orders within the same thing. So, you know, I ended up pursuing that and getting very heavily into that as a part of my personal private walk. All along the while, also, you know, finally going into business with Christian, we've opened a new store since then. We expanded a new store since then. We started Hexfest since then, the publishing company. So we've added on a lot of projects since when I first came here. So our business has continuously built. And at the same time, I was also increasing my activity in the hidden side of witchcraft. And Christian eventually ended up deciding he also wanted to become a priest of witchcraft. He'd been involved in the witchcraft world for many years, but being kind of like, it was almost like I was exposed to his world, he was exposed to mine, and it just slowly merged together, you know. So those, you know, I guess that's what marriage does sometimes. But also I think it was just being around it you know, and what have you. So nowadays, you know, yes, I've written my own book. I've been on TV. I've been pretty exposed. Being a famous witch is like being a famous janitor. If you're not really in that world, nobody, you know,
Right.
talk about the D-list. But in our small little world of witchcraft, we're very well known. But to the outside world, I don't think there's such a thing as very many famous witches.
Well, that's something I want to bring up, and I'm going to skip. I had an order, but I'm going to skip all over the place. When you open the book, and I read the first thing I read was the praises for your book. And I think the one that I enjoyed reading the most, and it said the most about, after I finished the book, the most about what you've done here, and to kind of talk about, you know, you make fun of the idea of being a famous witch, but what I think you've done with this book is you have laid kind of a layman's, it's easily understood for a layman, for somebody that's not in deep into the culture. But Val Hughes said the comment, Brian Cain has managed to find the balance between his obvious love for the craft and his responsibility for the tradition. And I think that's maybe what your duty as a famous witch may be, is to lay some tradition down for people like me, and lay some groundwork so that people like me who have an interest but not the breadth of knowledge or the breadth of resources, that we can understand it better than what we see in pop culture. You know, that we can understand that witchcraft isn't what you see on TV, and that by reading your book, it's obvious. And that's something I want to get to with the stores as well. But I really enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed the history of the gods and goddesses, and we'll get into all of that as well. So I'm sorry. So go ahead. Talk us a little bit about Hexfest.
Well, Hexfest is we already had the Festival of the Dead that we have in October, which is something that Christians started in Salem many years ago. Most people don't realize that Salem, Massachusetts wasn't always the big Halloween town it is today. You know, but you know, he was a part of that process. It all really started with Laurie Cabot, but he was a part of that process as far as like starting or revamping the Witches' Ball and starting the Festival of the Dead. So nowadays, it's a really big destination for people to go for Halloween, and it's really big business in Halloween as well. So we have the Festival of the Dead, which is kind of like a month-long Oktoberfest that has all these different like classes, the Dumb Supper, workshops, obviously the stores doing all those sorts of different activities, and then of course there's all these other businesses, haunted houses, things like that going on, and it culminates with the Witches' Ball, which probably will not occur this year, unfortunately. But it's big, you know, somewhere around 600 attendees, you know, depending on the year. So that was already going on. So we wanted to do something in New Orleans, you know, that was celebrating the magic of New Orleans. So what was going on here? So we picked the summer so that it would be opposite of our other festival. And we start out Hexfest on a riverboat, so that you actually are going down the Mississippi River.
Very cool.
You know, and we do a ritual on the riverboat, and that's kind of where our meet and greet is. We have a dinner, and it's really not a witchcraft gathering. It's what we like to call a magical gathering, because it really isn't centering just around witchcraft. We have witches, we have pagans, druids, magicians, Christians, practitioners of voodoo, conjure, hoodoo, everything under the sun, and they all come together with their respective practices, and what we're really sharing is the magic, because you have all these different belief systems, and that's New Orleans, you know, it's gumbo, the magic of New Orleans, and so I'm really happy with that festival. It's my favorite, and we've really kind of gathered a strong following of people who are like the Hexfest tribe, you know, of people that go every year. And, you know, I never actually thought I would bond with people as much as I have over Hexfest. So this year, unfortunately, it is going to all be online.
Yeah.
And we hate that. But the positive side of it is we have these great workshops. And if you go in person, which of course I think is better in a lot of ways, you've got to pick each section out of like 4 different workshops. So you can't actually go to all of them. You know, you're missing a lot of them. So the people who paid for it not only are getting a discount on next year in person, but they can actually watch every workshop there is at their own leisure. So there is kind of a benefit to it being online.
Yeah.
You know, plus you can't contract a virus.
Right, right. Nobody's getting sick. Yeah, you'll maybe on the computer, but not in your lungs, right? So
No Mississippi ritual, unfortunately, this year.
one of the things that you mentioned is that Hexfest is all inclusive, and you are a Alexandrian. You're of the Alexandrian tradition. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that means and some of the other traditions? You mentioned the two that you were discovered that you were first introduced to. I imagine there's more. That the umbrella is huge of traditions under witchcraft. Can you kind of talk a little bit about Alexandrian, and then maybe talk about some differences and some similarities with and obviously you don't have time to go through all of them. But what separates Alexandrians? What does Alexandrian mean? What are some of the other branches, I guess, for lack of a better term, or what do you call? I mean, what do you call another sect? Is that kind of how it's?
Well, usually the most popular word people use is tradition.
Tradition. Okay. Okay.
I hate to use Christianity as a comparison, but I do it because it's what most people might understand in layman's terms.
Yeah.
So if you were to look at Gardnerian, which originally it was just called witchcraft, the religion of witchcraft, and it sort of emerged in the 1950s by a man named Gerald Gardner. And he wrote the first two books, The Meaning of Witchcraft and Witchcraft Today, which were the first two books ever published by someone claiming to be a witch and stating that it was a religion and it was being practiced today. So he started the public, I guess, example of this. He also started forming covens throughout the UK, right? So think of it as, I think I talk a little bit about in my book, if you think of it as, well, it was a mystery cult. It was a religious caste. So at that point in time, it was the religion of witchcraft, and this was the witchcraft priesthood, and there wasn't any other traditions. There weren't anything else coming around. Of course, after he published books and started getting on TV and getting media, it started attracting what I would consider to be copycats.
Yeah.
Or people, oh, I'm a witch too, or it's in my family. Now, the Alexandrian tradition is really the kissing cousin of the Gardnerian tradition because it was founded by a man named Alexanders, who, for lack of a better word, was a Gardnerian. It wasn't called that, but he was initiated into a coven that was functioning within the same praxis. And so we have the same holy book that we all practice from. We all have the same gods. We all have the same rituals. So it's identically the same. The difference between Gardnerian and Alexandrian witchcraft is philosophical. Think about it like the Sith and the Jedi without the whole good and evil thing.
All right.
So, they both have lightsabers, they both have the Force, but there's a different way of interpreting it. So, we are a different sect. Those two are kind of like if you were to look at Catholicism and the Greek Orthodox Church. They're the oldest forms of witchcraft with the most complicated rituals, the longest history. We're now looking at approximately about 100 years of a succession with Gerald Gardner because we can trace the concept of this to the 1930s. He didn't come out with it publicly until the 1950s, but some of his first books written on the subject were the 1930s. So it was at least going on in his mind. Yeah. So we can trace it going back about 100 years now, which is older than Scientology. So, and it may be much older, that's the sort of thing. Other traditions have popped up independently, always led by whoever started it, just like other forms of Christianity popped up independently, not necessarily coming from a line of succession or a priesthood. It could have just been some independent guy who becomes, gets his ministry license and writes a book and stuff like that. So in a sense, witchcraft is this one big umbrella term for anyone who identifies as being a witch. But it also has a historical side of being a religion, and so you have all these different castes who do approach it as a religion. So yes, there's lots of traditions, but the only two that are connected from the original are Alexandrian and Gardnerian. The other ones were formed independently later on, with no connection to the materials that we operate with, other than what's been publicly published. Like if someone were to take my book and then start operating from it and start their own thing, doesn't make them Alexandrian, because this isn't
Right,
this
right.
isn't our holy book.
It makes them Brian Cananian, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So we talked a little.
Canaanite.
Canaanite. I think that's been taken, right? Has that been taken? I think we had talked a little bit before we came online, and I think this is maybe a good time to get it out of the way. With all the different sects or traditions, I guess, with all the different traditions, it does add a level of politics to witchcraft.
Yeah.
And I, as I mentioned, I follow you and Christian both on Facebook, and I see the barrage, for lack of a better way to say it, I see the barrage of political bullshit that you guys are hit with every day. That people, I think, as famous as you made fun of famous witches, I think you guys are the focal point for a lot of bullshit. I think people look to prove you, to either prove you inadequate of the leadership positions you're in, or they look at destroying some of the work you've done out of I don't know, maybe out of petty jealousy. But it seems that there's a lot of politics that are directed at you and at Christian and maybe at the tradition. What is it petty politics that drives this, or is there deep rooted? You compared it to the good and evil of the Jedi and the Jedi and the Sith, but is there a deep rooted historical struggle between some of the traditions, or is that all fairly in recent times?
Well, I think there has been conflict between traditions in the past. I mean, the Alexandrians and the Gardnerians didn't always get along, especially since we came about 10 years later, right? So we were, Alexandrian witchcraft is absolutely a heretical sect of Gardnerian witchcraft. I just happen to think we're right. And that's how this sort of thing works. I have the utmost respect for the Gardnerian tradition. And nowadays, most Gardnerians and Alexandrians actually get on fabulously, however, there was some rivalry in the past. I think nowadays it's not really, I don't think it's really a struggle between traditions usually.
It's personalities?
I think it's people who aren't in anything sometimes have a problem with people who are in something more committed, and I think this comes from Christianity. A lot of people who go on to practice the occult or to get into general paganism or witchcraft have been disillusioned, disenfranchised, or hurt by organized religion. So when they see something that in their mind resembles that at all, in any way, shape, or form, I think it's a rebellious act of, you can't tell me what to do. I'm going to do this, however I feel like doing it, and I don't want anyone to be in charge of me. I think that's particularly a thing in America, that you have that. And of course, we're not interested in doing that. The difference in the priesthood and witchcraft, we don't have a laity. We don't have a congregation.
Gotcha.
So we serve very differently. I serve my fellow priesthood, I serve my gods, and I serve humanity. But I don't have a laity. There's no congregation. And we don't convert. In fact, we often try to keep people out. So I think it comes from that. But I also think that there's all kinds of politics, because when it comes to what most people don't probably understand is that most people actually don't merge Christian and I. You get a few who do. You get some who's, they're married, so they're the united front. But in a lot of ways, he's like put in one box and I'm put in another. And that didn't used to always be the case, but it seems to be now. So I tend to deal with more of the politics of internal priesthood issues, I think. And because I have a really good ability to ignore everything else. Like it doesn't tend to get in. Nothing gets in unless I want it to.
Right.
Whereas Christian has an overarching sense for fairness and justice.
Yes, I sense that.
And he can't stand lying, and he can't stand that sort of thing. And he was a politics major. So I think a lot of times he has to deal with more of the business jealousy. I mean, I do get that, and he gets the other end as well. But I think he has to deal with more of the business jealousy and accusations of just wanting to make money. But I think also he's more socially conscious of, shouldn't say socially conscious. I think he shares his opinions.
There you go.
About issues that I don't discuss as much.
Okay.
I have, especially the last year or so, I think a lot of us have become more politically vocal because of the extreme situations we find ourselves in.
Right.
Whereas before, I would have never discussed probably politics publicly. I've been emboldened to do so because I think we're in so much trouble, and I don't want to push your show into a political statement, but I think everyone knows what I mean.
Oh, yeah, we've pushed. So yeah.
You know, yes. So because of that, I think we're all a little bit more, but I think it's, I think that in a sense, Christian's more accessible than I am.
Okay.
To have conversations with people. Whereas I just won't respond if I don't want to have the conversation.
Gotcha.
So I'm not as available. Like if somebody wants to like ridicule or like try to have a debate with me and I don't want to engage, then they cease to exist to me and it doesn't matter. Some people can do that. It's called being an ice queen. Other people, feel the need to have the conversation. So I think that his especially things have been going on lately, might seem more political than mine does.
Okay, so on the note about the business,
is witchcraft generally political? Well, let me explain that.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a huge story. Because when you're talking about Christian and me, I don't think that our political situation resembles most people in the craft. I think it's actually quite strange, because most people in the craft, they might be a witchcraft author, and so they're famous for writing books, or they might be a store owner. Or they might have done this or that, but very few witches have run covens, become initiated, and ran stores, and ran festivals, and been on TV, and written books. Like, we've done everything you could possibly do in the craft, like from the inner to the outer court. So it does make the bullseye a lot bigger than most people have to deal with. But the craft itself, I think that politics and the craft that I practice, Gardnerian and Alexandrian craft, the politics are actually supposed to be behind closed doors. So they are not supposed to be flayed out for the general masses. They do get so sometimes because of social media.
Right,
right. When we have disputes, it's supposed to be private. And because we work in independent covens, it's only 3 to 13 people in a coven. So how far can you really go with internal politics?
Right.
It happens, but, really, the craft is what's going on in your circle. So the craft to me primarily is my coven and what's going on in that coven, which has nothing to do with anybody else.
Gotcha. All right, so I'm going to give you a choice because you brought up coven. You want to talk covens or you want to talk business? We're going to get both, but what do you want to? Where do you want to go now?
I'm going to let you steer that.
All right. Well, okay. We're going to talk about the book then. We'll talk about the covens. You have a chapter on covens. And you talk. Let me pull it up here. You've got. You talk about the different kinds of covens, how to find a coven, kind of what a coven is. So, and keep in mind, as we talked a little bit earlier, the majority of the people watching the show from my end have a base level, a real layman's level of witchcraft. So I hope that they go out and get the book. But talk a little bit about the idea of a coven. I think most people's first experience of the word coven is probably from the movies, and so talk about the chapter about the different kinds of covens and what. Just give us the coven story.
Well, in the low breakdown, a coven basically is it operates in a few different ways. It's your it's your school, it's your training ground, it's the place where you worship, as well, right? And it's a place to practice the arts magical. So it's all of these different things at the same time. They are cloistered. So, and I'm speaking about initiatory witchcraft. They're cloistered, so it is private. You're initiated before you work with the coven. Some covens have an outer court system. So, they'll have like some sort of a pre-group that you can join without being initiated. And if it works out, then they initiate you and bring you into the real thing. That's not traditional, but some people do it. I don't. So once you're initiated, you're a priest or a priestess of witchcraft. So everyone in the coven is a priest or a priestess of witchcraft. There's not a minister and then everyone listening. You do have your high priesthood who are responsible for guiding and training the initiates. But also, it's a place to worship, to recharge your batteries, and to practice the arts magical. So covens sometimes, as I said earlier, 3 to 13 people. So that's the max number. And this goes back to the fact that in the old matriarchal year, there were 13 moons in a year, 13 months. So in a sense, every witch represents a moon in the year. So it's a lunar cult, it's also a fertility cult and a mystery cult and a magical religion. It's all of those things. This is symbolic. There's a lot of symbols and rituals in witchcraft, just like there is any religion. But I think that we have for the West, we have a lot of symbols, right? Everything has some sort of symbol to it. Sometimes, most covens are just going to call themselves a coven. They're not going to be like in the book and say, we're a training coven or we're a worship coven. It's particularly sort of an Alexandrian way of wording things, but it does happen to be true. And how that works out is that when you're talking about the broader tradition, occasionally you'll get covens that become known for something. So if there's a coven that's known within Gardnerian witchcraft, like they do a lot of healing work, they're a healing coven, that might be a coven people go to or check up on or ask for help if a real emergency for healing needed to take place, or if they had someone particularly who wanted to train to be a healer, it might be known. Likewise, a training coven is a place where, the coven is known for really the nuts and bolts of training really good initiates in the tradition and having like all the details. So it could be a place for people that might need to get retrained. Like maybe they were in a coven that didn't have very good training. So this other coven is well known as a good training coven. So they might be sent there for retraining. Some covens don't want to train anyone, and they want more experienced members. And usually we call these power covens or experimental covens, because they don't want the new witch who's going to foul up the work they're doing. And they probably don't want very many. They might just want 4 to 8 people, working there, people who are all senior. They don't want to be training. They want to get on with the magic. They don't want to be teaching someone how to do anything. Those are all very rare, but they do exist. Most covens just call themselves covens. And a lot of covens are what we call worship covens, because they're really more interested in just getting together and having a family feeling community together. That's not really the Alexandrian way. We try to tend to avoid family feelings. We do seem to focus a little bit more, most, as occultists and on the power. And for instance, in our line, we practice a no socializing rule. So outside of coming together, we don't see each other or have friendships.
Okay. So what are
friends will, have Tupperware parties together.
what are the tenets? I mean, what would be some of the tenets of the Alexandrian tradition? Some of the core values.
Well, I think it's philosophies in a sense. So first you'd have to kind of go over what are the tenets of witchcraft, which we would share with the Gardnerians. And obviously we're a magical religion. So we believe in that magic. We believe in power to create change. Oh, I was just reading something I thought it was just a meme. I'm not much of a meme person, but it said, magic is the art of speaking to the universe in a language it cannot ignore. I thought that was good.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
But obviously we believe in magic. We also believe in a god and a goddess. So we have a divine mother and a divine father. We have agricultural holidays. We work with the cycles of life, the seasons of nature. We do have ethics. We do have occult ethics that guide us. Probably the most well-known and ridiculed one is the Wiccan Rede, and it harm none, do what you will. Witch's Creed, as I prefer to say it. It's not a 10 commandment, it's a guide that basically says, do what you want to do, but don't make it with the intent to harm. You want to get rich, that's fine, but don't do it by using child labor.
Right.
To make a sweat lodge. It's a way to live. It's kind of like the golden rule. Yeah. And so we have lots of ethics like that, things like that guide us. That's probably the most well known. Now, where Gardnerian and Alexandrian witchcraft differs is, and this is complicated, and I go into this in my book, because as you'll see in my book, there's not one kind of Gardnerian or
Right,
one kind
right.
of Alexandrian. So it's really hard to say, but what I try to focus on when I'm discussing is I'm thinking in my mind of the first Gardnerians and the first Alexandrians, because if you're going to talk about the traditions that simply, then you have to look there. We're looking at like 70, 100 years later now, so it's like a lot has gone on. And, you do get bad teachers in anything. So some people don't have all the information, or things have gotten twisted or fouled up. Fortunately, with the level of communication we have today, that's easily remedied by those who are not overcome by ego. So, you just say, oh, I didn't know that, or I want to know that. I think that's true in learning anything, right? So really, the philosophies that we say, and this is not to say that Gardnerians don't have these things, but we say it's, I really think it's about beauty, freedom, and power. Those are the three core things that I look at as being Alexandria keystones. I think we're also more occult in our approach to witchcraft. I think that we focus a bit more on Western occultism as being a part of witchcraft, or witchcraft being a part of Western occultism. We don't see too much of a divide for that. In a sense, we're sort of like the goddess's answer to a Western esoteric tradition. Whereas some Gardnerians, I feel like they tried to pretend they crawled out of a Celtic bog. And I don't think that's true of all of them, but I don't think any of us crawled out of a Celtic bog, So but it's not one note. You've got Gardnerians that are tremendous occultists, and you've got Alexandrians that, think they crawled out of a bog.
Right.
So,
right.
Not that simple. But really, we're both castes of priesthood for the religion of the goddess, and it's magical. So there are lots of details that are different, and also how we do the rituals. Like you've got how a Catholic priest might do a ritual versus a Greek Orthodox priest. They're similar in a lot of ways, but there are minute details that are different.
Okay. Well, I have a weird fascination. Well, not a weird fascination, a scholarly fascination with the personalities of the occult. I've studied Anton LaVey a great deal, and Crowley a great deal. And I think one of the things that both of them have in common that I appreciate and also kind of loathe is the showmanship. There's a wonderful magician, no K magician, that was a performing magician who was from Chicago, and Tony Andruzzi was his name, and he did a lot of the dark arts kind of stuff in magic. And he wrote in his biography written by Jim Magus, he talks about that Anton LaVey came to Magic Inc. in Chicago to buy flash powder and to buy flash paper and stuff for his ceremonies, and that he learned magic tricks while studying showmanship to start this religion, or to start this group.
Was this in the circus before all of that? I think he was.
Well, that's the story that they tell you. Well, I don't know. I mean, he tells you he was also in his version of the story. He also was a crime scene photographer for the San Francisco police, and that he played the organ on whatever. But I think this is where I'm going with this, is that they've created this larger than life showman attitude. I mean, I don't know. I think everybody probably could tell you a little bit about Aleister Crowley, but nothing about his teachings and nothing about his writings. And so I wonder what part and what part of witchcraft is the ceremony and is the showmanship. You talked about you've got some people that think they crawled out of the bog, and those are the showman, right? And the ceremony where it's I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I see what you're saying. If you look at Aleister Crowley, he was a wealthy young man. He came into inheritance, and he joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is what he was initiated into. So he learned an entire system of magic that is very iconic in the occult. Then he went on to join another magical order, the OTO, and learn that system of magic. Then he invented taking that over. I believe he was a Mason as well. So he had all these 3 different initiations that we know of.
Right.
3 different occult orders. I think he was a showman for sure, in many respects, but I do think that, television hadn't really quite come onto the, stage yet. So God knows what it would have been like if he would have come out of the later period. When you're going into witchcraft, Gerald Gardner was the, first, he was definitely a showman in his own right. He not only wrote the first 2 books, but he started a witchcraft museum, and he appeared on television. He was the first witch on TV, as well as radio and things like that. And, I think he was walking the dog a little bit. People meet a witch and they, expect something, And I think some witches do that better than others. There is an outer court of witchcraft. For instance, I didn't dress like this on the Travel Channel.
Right.
I was going to investigate a satanic cult in the woods, and then I was going to investigate a haunted Masonic lodge or whatever it was. So there was a bit of walking the dog that was sort of expected, of that sort of a thing. And you can use that to educate the general public on the truth of it all. We have to get their attention first.
Well, absolutely. No, absolutely.
When Christian and I are in Salem for Halloween time, we don't walk down the street in suits and ties. That would really disappoint the kids.
Right.
We'll have big old witch hats and everything. And some witches don't like that, and I can see why. But you have to realize, sometimes when you're pushed on a stage, you have to cater to what's going on at the time.
Absolutely.
I think you can do these things and do it in a noble way. I mean, Alex Sanders, the patriarch of our line, was considered the showman of witchcraft. And he did some fantastic and outrageous things, and said and did some fantastic and outrageous things to get the attention of the media and the cameras. But once he had them, then he could go on to educate about witchcraft. And that's how I use it, like whether it's MTV or the Travel Channel or you or whoever it's going to be, it gives me those moments to actually speak about the religion of witchcraft.
Right.
One of the main things I teach the general public is that it is a religion, and you have tons of witches out there now who are saying, oh, it's not a religion, it's a practice. And that's very confusing to the general public.
Right.
To have a bunch of people saying one thing and another bunch of people to say something else. I always just say, look to the history. You can find it. It's on Google. It's on Wikipedia. No one was calling witchcraft just a practice, for a very long time. From the 50s going all the way into the 90s, people were teaching that it was a religion. They weren't teaching that it was just a practice. Yeah, you had those fringe people that nobody cared about, who put flies in a jar and said that they were real witches. But this has been an ongoing thing. I think nowadays people like to try to take the word witch away from witchcraft and say that we're, Wiccans, or that we're practicing Wicca. What they failed to see in that ignorant statement is all that word is Old English for witch. It's not a different word. It's literally Old English. And if it was pronounced properly, it would be pronounced witcha or witche or witchian. It's not actually pronounced Wicca. But because people don't know that, and the ignorance has gone on and it's become cosmopolitan, it's a strange thing for me to hear someone say, that actually had people say it to me, you're not a witch, you're a Wiccan.
I'll tell you what I am, right?
I'm not a modern English witch, I'm an Old English witch.
Right.
Okay,
right,
sure.
Right.
And you're saying it wrong.
Right.
Point is, there is a history to this, and witchcraft is a legally recognized religion in several Western countries, and it is practiced as a religion by thousands of people across the world. So it most certainly is a religion, though some people call themselves witches and they're not practicing our religion. So one must ask, are we even the same thing? My answer to that is no. And that's where you get some of the politics. It's because people will say, well, you're saying I'm not a witch because I don't do what you do. And to be honest, I'm not really saying that. I just don't care, and I don't recognize as what they're doing as being a part of what I'm doing.
And we have that struggle in my field, in being a performance magician. Because you know a card trick, does that make you a magician? right? I mean,
Yeah.
because you know how things work and you know how the routine on TV is done. Does that make you a magician? I don't know, and that's up for interpretation, I guess, amongst themselves. Well, I got to tell you, I didn't know a whole lot about witchcraft. I thought I did. I thought I knew. You know, I'd read several books on the Salem witch trials, and I'd watched the documentaries on TV. But I think your book. I think your book is great. I think it's a very good introduction, and it's. I've made several notes of things that I want to look up later. One of the questions I had after reading your book, and I wrote it down now, is the character, and I don't mean character as a term of disrespect, but Alex Sanders seemed like he was probably somebody that was pretty fun to know, and that was pretty fun. Where would one find out more about Alex Sanders? Is there a biography, or is there some work about him or by him that you would recommend?
It's really kind of a long, winding road, because in a lot of ways, I think Alex is yet to see his day. There's a priest named Jamal DeFazio, who did write a book called A Coin for the Ferryman, which is about the life of Alex Sanders. I think it's very good. Don't know why his other book is slipping my mind right now. He wrote another book that's also very good. So that's probably the closest thing I can think to a biography. It is written by someone who never met him, right?
Yep.
So, but he goes and he interviews people that have. You know, for instance, I never met Alex Sanders. You know, I have met Maxine Sanders. I've worked in circles with Maxine Sanders. You know, so I know her. So I can't really say whether if I would have thought Alex was fun to know or not, because I never met him. But from what I hear, I have often heard he was a very fun person to know. Yeah. Very funny, very intelligent, a bit of a leg puller. He had no problem having a bit of sport with the naive sometimes.
Yep.
But I didn't know him. Everyone says he was very powerful, very charismatic. I'm very careful not to fall in love with our elders if I didn't know them.
Yeah.
I could say I admire their work, but I think a lot of people in the craft and in other traditions and things try to feel like they're bonded to someone because they read about them or because they are connected in some ways. And I think, well, I didn't know them. I might not have liked them.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up. Next week, my guest on the show is Sean Branney, and Sean is the executive director of the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. Okay. And I'm really looking forward to talking to him about that. None of us knew H.P. Lovecraft, right? And I have an appreciation for his work. I think his work is some of the most fascinating, well-written, weird tales I've ever read. But the more we're finding out about Lovecraft as a person, he was a scumbag. I mean, he was a racist. He was not a good dude. And so that's one of the things that I think we fall into is this in pop culture is this hero worship of celebrity without kind of understanding. And I like how you said that you don't fall in love with the people that you never met. I think I really like that. I really like that a lot.
I've always said, and I don't know if I'll ever get in trouble for it or not, but I have always said that I feel, I sort of stole it from someone else, but that I feel like my witchcraft lineage is more of a product of Maxine Sanders than Alex Sanders. Well, because she's the one who ran the Temple of the Mother, and that's where our training and practice comes from. And that was after they had divorced.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I did get a question emailed to me on my page earlier. And somebody just put on here that Firechild by Maxine Sanders is a great bio for Alex, maybe the best one to date.
That's not really it's not about Alex, it's about her, number one. So I think it probably does have, it's a great book. It is unfortunately out of print now, so you'll have to, you probably still get it if you look for it used. It is a great book, but it's really about her life. Okay.
The question that was
my perception of it.
I'm sorry?
That's always been my perception of it.
Okay.
I think hers too.
The question that was messaged to me over Facebook was about the Temple of the Mother and about how that they have a focus on the healing arts and the terminally ill. And I think you talked about this earlier, so you may have answered this, but do all Alexandrian covens share that same focus of healing arts and helping the terminally ill?
Well, I can't say I have a complete breakdown of every stage of the Temple of the Mother.
Right.
I don't think everyone in the Temple of the Mother just focused on as healers, but I do know that she had good healers and that they did do healing work and work with the dying and a lot of charity work as well. They were really well respected in the community that they were practicing in London. I always say that not all witches are healers, but all witches heal. So I think any witch in any coven is probably trained the healing arts to some degree. But no, I wouldn't say that my coven particularly focuses on healing work. I find it quite boring.
Okay, there you go. So so I'm going to put the links up to some of these books that you've mentioned. I'll put them up on the Facebook page so people can look them up, and I'll absolutely put a link to your book. One of the things I want to talk about, and this is, I emailed you this, we talked over Messenger about this, is the business side of witchcraft. I would be willing to bet, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the majority, the large majority of people that walk into your two stores are more naive about it than I am. That they are the tourist browsers, the lurkers that have always just are walking and looking. What you've already talked kind of about your duty to inform and educate. What part of inform, educate does the store take? Your stores are set up they're beautiful. You guys make a lot of your own stuff, and they're great stores, and your stores are, I think, maybe serve as the introduction to witchcraft for a lot of people.
Stores have been very important for witchcraft and magical communities. In fact, I used to say that stores were like our churches early on. When I first got into witchcraft, I was talking about my early days in Washington. There was a New Age bookstore called the Open Door Books. That's where all the occultists and everyone went. It was the only place to go in town. I think early on it was like that, and I think it's still like that today, that stores are sometimes newer practitioners or solitary practitioners' gateway to other people initially.
Okay.
And most stores do have things like workshops and various things like that. Even in London, there's the really iconic stores that have been around. Atlantis Books has been around since Gerald Gardner. Gerald Gardner used to go into that store. So they've always been a thing. So there's two sides of it. And one side of it is, we're able to support the authors who write books. We're able to support the magical vendors, the people that make magical jewelry, the people that make magical products. We're the ones that sell their wares, not just us, but any shop owner. Especially the occult artists who are not going to get into any major fame. They really rely on those homegrown stores. And it's a great place to obviously educate people about the various magical traditions. But as a business, it's retail. Witchcraft in itself is not a business. Because of the business we're in, we're able to support all these mediums surrounding magic and our religion. But I think the big mistake a lot of people make when they go into any kind of magical business is they forget that it's a business. So in the end of the day, it functions just like any other retail store. And I was in retail for 30 years before I was involved in these businesses. I can tell you exactly that. The orders, the bills, the disciplinary conversations, the customer service issues, they're all exactly the same.
Yeah.
Witchcraft doesn't make it magically go away.
Right.
There's two sides to it. I mean, we love what we do because of what opportunity it creates for our customers, for the vendors, for the writers, for our employees, for the readers. It creates multitudes of opportunities. And that's how we get a lot of our media, because they will go to store owners to find witches or whatever. It's easy way to find people.
Well, Marita just joined us on and put that they also have your book at her shop. So if you don't buy it directly from Brian, buy it from the Vampire Boutique on Feel the Bite, or is it feelthebite.com. So
yeah, you can get my book obviously on Amazon, or you can get it at hexwitch.com or omensalem.com. New Leaf, Ingram, Barnes & Noble, I think Azure Green. That's what I know off the top of my head.
Well, and if you buy it directly from Brian, you can get it
signed. Yeah.
You can get it signed. That
takes a little longer because of COVID-19 for me to sign.
Yes, you can get it. You can get it signed. I'll find it here. Yes, you can get it signed. And you know what's fun? Marita always joins. There you go. You can get them signed. I don't know if you can see it. Marita always joins after I sing her praises. So now that she's on, I'll say some nice things about Marita. She's the one that introduced me to Brian, and she's I cannot say enough nice things about her. So Marita, thanks for all of your support. So the store, I kind of want to go back to the store. Every town has a new age store of some sort. You guys have really made it high class. I mean, it's a different vibe. You walk in and you have all of your employees. They know they're not retail people. They're not just retail people. They're educated retail people. They know, they answer questions. I've been in there before I knew you and Christian. I went in to buy some books, and they know their stuff. And I think that's a rare thing in retail anymore. With the internet taking over, most retail sales, I think going into a store, such an esoteric and kind of niche store as yours, and being able to get questions answered as opposed to, oh, it's over there. So I think you guys have done a good job.
I'll give Christian the credit for what the stores look like in their branding, because he also worked for a major ad agency. So he really developed the branding, and that's really his periphery to brand the stores and handle the marketing. But I'll take credit for the employees because I'm in charge of operations.
There you go.
And I've worked for specialty stores before, and I think in specialty stores, you have to have people who are product experts, because that's why people go to destination specialty stores.
Right.
If you don't go to a record store, you don't want to have a clerk that doesn't know anything about music.
Right, absolutely.
Or a magician's store, you want somebody that knows the tricks, right?
Well, and what's funny is when you said that's where you would go to meet other witches. That's where magicians, back in the day, that's where magicians would go to meet other magicians. They'd go to the magic shop, and after hours, they'd have, sit around tables and show each other, new moves or whatever they're working on. But if you go back and watch some of these, I say this often, I hate magicians. They're the worst people. So it's a long story for some other day. So, but you at your stores, you also you have tarot readers. Is that correct?
Psychic readings. Usually they do tarot cards, but some of them do other things.
Okay. Now, is that an add-on bonus to the store, the retail, or is that also part of your tradition of witchcraft?
Well, I mean, witches are occultists, especially Alexandrians. So most Alexandrians have some training in the divining arts. Mm-hmm. They may not do it professionally, but they certainly have been exposed to it. I think tarot is a major go-to for most occultists, but not everyone. Some people scry, some people read leaves, some people, do palms, some people just know things.
I had a good friend of mine was on the show several weeks ago, maybe months ago. My friend Soydan is from Turkey, and his grandmother did Turkish coffee readings. And she taught him as a young kid to do the readings. And he's working on a book right now about the Turkish tradition of coffee readings. And it was very interesting to talk to him about that. In your book, you talk about the tools of witchcraft. Some of the tools that are used, and I think you call them weapons, the weapons of witchcraft. What are some of the weapons that are the tools that I'm a collector, and so I have a collection of Ouija boards, and I have a collection of I have a scrying mirror, a black mirror. I have several spirit trumpets, those kind of things that come out of the spiritualist movement. What are some of the tools and some of the devices that you guys that witchcraft practices with?
Well, I mean, there's, as we've spoken earlier, there are various traditions, and within any magical system, you're going to find some sort of tools that are being used. Usually when we're talking about magicians, we're talking about ceremonial magicians.
Right.
They'll usually have like elemental tools, or there's a book that was translated by a member of the Golden Dawn called the Key of Solomon. Has a vast array of swords and knives and wands and staves and pentacles. In fact, most of the book is about pentacles, planetary pentacles that are made to invoke various planetary spirits. If you want love in your life, you'll select a particular, planetary pentacle for Venus and consecrate it on the right day and hour and perform the right rituals, burn yourself some incense, all of that sort of thing. So historically, what I'm going through in the book there is I'm sort of highlighting a lot of magical tools. And of course, I incorporate a lot of tools associated with witches and witchcraft with various traditions, whether it's wands or knives or swords. And of course, how we use them, I don't really go too much into that, because unless you're practicing that particular system, it doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
So, it depends on what system you're getting into. Usually the tools are used to symbolize something, or to direct energy, or for protection. It's just always, you've always got the wizard and his staff, right? I love the Tolkien Lord of the Rings, how all the wizards had the particular staff that represented their personal power. They didn't really need the staff necessarily, yet they did need the staff.
Yeah.
There's almost like a riddle in that, right? So I love that about the witch's tools. In the craft, probably the main tool of the witch is called the athame, and that's probably one of my particular pet peeves, because within the Gardnerian and Alexandrian tradition, there's a particular way the athame has to be made and consecrated and used for it to not be a knife anymore, for it to become an athame.
Okay.
And the word athame only has its origins in one place, the Book of Shadows, our holy book, right? So it doesn't belong outside of that. So now you'll have all these like magical shops and stuff, and they're selling knives, and they call them athames. Oops. Sorry about that.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I have this friend who always knows how to call me at the worst possible time, and I didn't realize that my ringer was on, and now it made you small, and I don't know how to make you big again.
If you go up to the top, it'll say like, let's see here. I think it says speaker view or guest view. I don't know. Or
there we go.
All right, perfect. There you go.
Stretch it out.
Well, and that's another one of my little tabs I have in here, is I wanted to talk about the Book of Shadows.
Oh, it's still small, but I can see myself.
Okay.
I can't see you though. I don't know what I did here.
I think on Zoom, if you go up to the upper right-hand corner, there's a tab, and I don't want to click it because I don't want to change it. But I think you go up to the upper right-hand corner, and it'll give you some options. You can click on speaker view, and then or grid view. I don't know what they are. I'm working on. You've given me a suggestion for another platform, so I'm going to work on some different things. But now you've muted yourself. Let me see if I can unmute you. Yeah, you got to hit unmute. We can't hear you. You got to. There you go. Yep. You're back on.
All right, I'm just going to leave it alone then.
Okay.
I can see myself, I just can't see you.
Well, you're way prettier than I am, so we'll just add rather. So the Book of Shadows. You mentioned that. Oh, no problem. You mentioned that several times in the book, and I was unfamiliar with the Book of Shadows. So kind of talk about the Book of Shadows.
Well, basically, the Book of Shadows is the magical grimoire that Gerald Gardner had, that was given to all the witches that he initiated. So we hand copy it. So it's been passed down throughout the Gardnerian Alexandrian tradition. It's copied by hand. So it's not available for public consumption. It's not for sale. There are pieces of it that have been leaked out by people who done that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's kind of like if you had a secret Bible for Christians. So once again, you now have you've got all these other traditions of witchcraft that have been formed based off of what we published. So anything, so now you've got like witches will buy like a blank book and say it's their Book of Shadows. To someone in the tradition, we're like, no, it's not. It's a blank book.
Right.
And no matter what you write in it, it's not going to be the Book of Shadows, because the Book of Shadows is the name for that particular grimoire, and so it's sort of silly. It'd be like if you called every book out there the Key of Solomon, or every book of, this is my Goetia, this is my Key of Solomon. It's actually the name of her book, but it's become cosmopolitan, and that is a definition that exists. So I think that's the confusion that, because we live in a world where it's like, let's be inclusive, like let's include everyone. I think sometimes it goes to the point of idiocy, because it's like, how do you include make it up as you go along? Like, how do you include that in something that's already established? I personally am just like, you do you, I'll do me.
Yeah.
But I do, is it something worth getting bent out of shape about? Not really, but as somewhat of a history buff, I can't help but point it out.
Well, and you're also kind of the, you're kind of also appointed a guardian of the tradition. I mean, you've taken that role by putting...
Any initiate is supposed to be.
Okay.
They're not all good at it.
Yeah.
But any initiate is supposed to be.
Somebody once told me, and I wish I could remember where this was, that there's a tradition in witchcraft of passing things on by spoken word only, and that you repeat things spoken word, that they're not supposed to be written down. Is there anything to that, or did I see this in a movie once?
In our training, we've got, we say that the Book of Shadows is like the skeleton of the craft. So there is in my lineage, I can't speak for everyone, but there's absolutely oral lore, yes.
Okay.
The problem with oral lore is it can get lost.
Well, and it's like a game of telephone, right? I mean, you get someone with an agenda, and they can change a whole philosophy real quick.
Oh yes.
So that's kind of one of the importances, I guess, things of writing things down. Having some sort of authority write things down, as you get the authority's word on it, But I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that translates into a belief system either. So, so we're at about the halfway point. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a couple minutes to do a little bit of housekeeping and kind of talk about what's coming up, and then I'm going to get into some. I want to get into some Brian Cain questions, as opposed to just talking about the book and witchcraft. I want to know a little bit about you and a little bit about your. Some of the interests of stuff you have. So what I've got coming up real quick, we'll just take a couple seconds. If you want to take a break and go refill your coffee or anything, I will, or return the phone call and come back when you're ready, or you can sit through and listen to me talk for a few minutes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. We've got Sean Branny next week from the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. The next week is Brandon Hodge. August 9th is Brandon Hodge from the Mysterious Planchette. On August 16th, I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to take a prolonged road trip to go take care of some stuff and do some fun and visit some friends. So on the 15th, I'll be leaving Greeley. On the night of the 15th, I've got a show in Wilson, Kansas. If you are anywhere within a stone's throw of Wilson, Kansas, and want to come to this show, let me know. I don't know anything about it other than it's at the Overland Railroad Hotel in Wilson, Kansas, population 780 people. So we'll see how that goes. And then I'll be in Dallas for a few days. I've got a couple meetings set up with some people in Dallas. And then I'll be in New Orleans for a while. When I leave New Orleans, I'm going to head up and visit my friend Paul Prater, who was on the show a couple weeks ago, in Little Rock, and have my picture taken next to Dennis Rapert's monument to himself. I'll be back sometime before the 30th. On the 23rd, Sunday the 23rd, I'm hoping to do this show live from New Orleans. I'm looking for a place to do it, and I've got some people that I'm interested in that I've talked with about coming on. There may be some performances, there may be some readings. It's going to be a fun one in one of my favorite cities in the world with some of my favorite people. August 30th, I've got the XX Paranormal Research Group. It's an all-women paranormal studies group from Denver. I'm looking forward to that quite a bit. There's some fun folks. September 6th, I don't know if we're going to do one the weekend of September 6th. It's Labor Day, so we'll see. And then September 13th, I'm really excited about. This is, and I've kind of teased it a little bit. I don't know if I've actually talked about it. I've got Jake Anderson, who wrote a book called Gone at Midnight, The Mysterious Death of Elisa Lam. They're making a documentary called What Happened to Elisa Lam. And she, if you're not familiar with the Elisa Lam story, look it up, Elisalam. She disappeared in a really weird way in the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. It's the one where she's punching the numbers in a code on the elevator, and she just disappears one night. 19 days later, they find her in the water tank on the top of the hotel. It's a really, really crazy, weird story. So Jake Anderson will be on September 13th. If you want a heads up on the the story, go to Amazon and get Gone at Midnight by Jake Anderson. September 20th and 27th are still open. If you guys have any suggestions or any ideas or folks that you would like to see on, I've got a list of folks that I'm working with. We're trying to reschedule Kim and Jen from Booze and Bourbon podcast. I was really disappointed that one didn't work out. It was going to be a lot of fun. We sent them a box of Tower 56 bourbons, and we were going to have some fun drinking whiskey and talking about ghosts with the girls from the Booze and Bourbon podcast. So that's kind of the schedule for what's coming up. If you guys have any suggestions, and also if you have any questions for Brian, go ahead and shoot them on the Facebook page, and we'll hit them up. But if you have any suggestions or folks you think would like to come on, you'll notice I have not been getting as drunk as I did the previous several weeks. The last couple of weeks, it's tea and water for now. So we'll see. That may change when the Booze and Bourbon girls come back on. But good timing, Brian. You're back. So we talked a little bit about what my show is about. My show is about kind of the dark history, and I like to talk about serial killers. I've got a routine based on the psychic detectives that were searching for the Zodiac killer. One of the new things that I just recently discovered is a group that got it's got to start in London, England, and then it moved to Mexico, and then when it came out of Mexico, I think it settled in New Orleans, and it's called the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Are you familiar with the Robert de Grimm and the Process Church? All I can find out is that they made a movie called Sympathy for the Devil about it, a documentary that came out a couple of years ago. And all I can find out is that their New Orleans base was on Royal Street. So there's a Facebook page and a website for the movie. So I've been trying to contact them to find out where it was, because I'd like to go see where it was, and but I didn't know. Have you heard of the Final Church of the Process Church of the Final Judgment?
I've heard of a group called The Process, which actually I think that Mr. Manson was connected to.
Well, they talk about that in the movie, and that some of his followers had attended a meeting, but in the movie they're very, very clear that he was not part of it. But
I heard about it. There was a woman that I heard was in it, but I don't know a lot about it.
Okay. Well, in the movie they interview a woman from New Orleans, and they're walking down the street and she's a psychic tarot reader, and I've tried to look her up and I can't find anything about her, so I need to go back and watch the movie. But I just while we're talking, I made a note and I looked up to make sure I didn't get it wrong, just to see if you had heard anything about it. That's one of the topics that I'm looking for. I
have a friend who I'll ask who's a little bit more knowledgeable about the local occult history. If I hear anything, I'll let you know.
Perfect. Thank you. So what kind of and this is just going to be kind of like just getting to know Brian Cain. What are your outside of witchcraft and outside of I got a question. So Marita asks, Brian and Christian went to Egypt recently. She's wondering what kind of experiences in any way grew your magic.
Well, I've always had a fascination with Egypt. That's been there for me for a long time. It's not, the only culture that interests me, and certainly I'm not the first Alexandrian to be interested in Egypt. However, there's a place Alexandria was amazing on its own. Unfortunately, there's not a lot to see there, but we did go to Alexandria, Egypt first, and that was important to me because it's one of my favorite ancient cities in the world. It's like ancient London. It was a real, I know you're not supposed to say melting pot anymore because we're a salad, but it was a cultural melting pot and had such an extravagant history with so many very important people and so many iconic moments for religion and world religion. Most people don't realize that even modern Christianity sort of comes out of Alexandria, Egypt. It's where some of the first councils and what have you were. Obviously, Cleopatra and Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar and Mark Antony and all that fabulous history that surrounded it, but also just this melting pot between the Egyptian culture and the Hellenistic world, that really influences all occultists today. So I was really, really fascinated by that. But down south, there's an island called Philae that has a temple to Isis. And I'd have to say that was really my highlight. We took, we took a Nile cruise, so we were actually on the Nile for several days, and it was a stop along the way. And it was an extremely powerful place that I wanted to stay a lot longer than I did. So I felt like I reached through time and space. I really did. So I think it was a validation. There is something about being in the ancient world. The thing I hate about going to the ancient world is it's like, why can't we have nice things anymore?
Right.
Why were things so cool and beautiful once, and why is it like this now? So that's sort of sad. But, at the same time, I think my favorite thing about Egypt was, even in the most impoverished Muslim towns that we visited, it was still the temples that were supporting the communities. Even though they had forsaken their gods, the temples were still supporting those communities. I thought that was interesting.
So in your book, there's some pictures of your other travels. Is that I imagine that's a big deal to you. What are some of the other places you've been that you that you brought home with you? You brought some of it home. What are some of your other places?
I've now been to, not every place I want to go, but all the countries I really care about. The UK, obviously. I've been to London, Wales, Ireland. I have yet to be to Cornwall or Scotland, so those are goals. I have been to Italy. We visited Florence, Positano, Neme, and Rome, and then I was in Athens and Crete, and throughout Egypt. So I'd like to go back to all of them, but I'd say my favorite places that I've been magically, if I was going to give you my top 3 places, it would be the island of Philae in Egypt, Neme in Italy, and probably Eleusis.
Okay.
I did like Athens, but I didn't fall in love with Athens until the last night I was there.
I did Athens, but we were just there for a day, and we did the basic tourist sites. But I loved it as well. I was surprised with some of the poverty in areas of Athens. With you cross the street or some of the greatest buildings in the history of human the human civilization, and then I'm not a very spiritual person, and
it's opulent wealth compared to what the people of Egypt have to live in.
Oh, I imagine. I was in La Paz, Bolivia, a couple years ago, and it was heartbreaking. How the people in La Paz, Bolivia, then their government's run by a hardcore Catholic, so you have to get a prescription for condoms, and it is. They make it really hard to get any sort of birth control, which has made the AIDS problem ridiculous, and the overpopulation. It's and that's one of the things I think we take for granted. I think it's our responsibility to travel and see some of these things and bring home some of these ideas. Where I was going is I'm not very spiritual, but there's a couple places in the world that I have felt heavy, that I have felt something. Istanbul, Turkey is one of them. That's just a place where you stand in the Grand Bazaar, and there's stalls at the Grand Bazaar that the same family has owned since biblical times, and they've passed it down from son to son to son to son. That's pretty heavy. But Egypt is on my list. I had an opportunity to go to Egypt a couple of years ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago, when I worked for a beef company, and we were planning on going, and within the couple weeks of our trip to go, is when they took over the presidential palace and lit everything on fire, and they said, "Well, we're not going to go. We're it's not a good idea to go." So, but Egypt is on my list for sure. Egypt's on my list. So what other things do you other than witchcraft? What are some of your other hobbies?
Outside of witchcraft? Yeah. What do you mean outside? What is this outside of witchcraft?
Well, okay, well, I didn't mean that. I mean, like, what kind of movies? What kind of music? What kind of?
Well, obviously.
And I didn't mean to imply it was a hobby.
I'm teasing.
Okay.
I'm just like, do I have an identity outside of what the Illuminati's given me? I don't know. I have dogs. I've got 3 poodles. I'm a huge animal person. I don't have any cats right now. I miss having a cat, but I do have 3 dogs. So that's a big thing. I love to swim. I am a video game player. That's my big nerd secret most people wouldn't know about.
So what's the deal with The Last of Us? Have you played that one?
I have not played that.
Okay. I just saw a bunch of people have been posting about something called The Last of Us. Is that a game?
Sounds familiar, but I don't.
Okay.
Um, oh, I love shopping. I like wine, but
Yeah.
that could just be considered witchcraft. Um, Obviously, like traveling. We like to go out to eat. We like when you could go to the movies. That was fun. Back in the day when you could do those sorts of things.
So as a witch and a historian of witchcraft and an authority on witchcraft, what do you, when you go see a movie and there's witches and they talk about witchcraft in the movie, what how do you do it? How do you reconcile the pop culture version of the witch versus the a real witch?
Well, I think sometimes people need to remove the broomstick from their derriere. It's fun.
Yeah.
I look at it fun. I don't approach it as sometimes if it's like really gross or gory or murderous, it might bother me in some ways. But really, I just look at it. I approach it as fun. Most media that has witches on it, isn't really that bad nowadays, and it usually is kind of fun. Like Practical Magic or something like that, or The Craft. It's just fun. It's not real. It's not real.
Right,
it's kind of
right.
like, Marita's a vampire.
Right.
She can't turn into a bat. She wishes she could.
Right.
She can't.
She's working on it, I think. I think she's working on it.
She might murder people on the balcony.
Yeah.
That's about as real as it gets.
So Marita just came with another question. She said, can Brian talk a little bit about the power of the spoken word incantation? Does he find this to be an important aspect of manifesting results? I'm curious to what he thinks. I've been meaning to ask him. So,
I do. In fact, in the occult, when you think about some of the words in occults, like grimoire it's connected to the word grammar, spelling, to put on a spell, incantation. These are all things that are connected to our current vocabulary. From ancient Egypt, writing the hieroglyphs and the spoken word and the precision within that was really important to magic. And the reason why is because it's thought, isn't it? So obviously, if it's really a part of your mind and you're then placing it down or speaking it out and articulating it with meaning, the magic word abrahadabra is said to roughly translate as I speak, I create. So yes, I do think it does. Obviously, that in itself, isn't going to necessarily change the universe. But yes, I think that poetry and music and the spoken word has always been a part of putting on a spell or a magical ritual. And certainly it is a milestone of what we do.
we've got another question from Stephanie. Stephanie asks, speaking of animals, are familiars a thing in witchcraft? Are they a real thing in witchcraft?
Not really, no. Where that comes from is, you'll have a lot of people who do things and say, oh, I'm going to make a familiar. So the verbiage has obviously been adopted in a modern way. But where that comes from is in the witch trials and witchcraft folklore, you had that witches would have a familiar spirit. And that's what it was called, a familiar spirit. It would often take the form of an animal. I think this really harkens back to, old shamanic practices and the ideas that fairies and gods and other spirits of nature would sometimes take on the form of animals. Look to ancient Egypt. Animals were often used as a medium between the gods and humanity. And I think that's true within every culture. We get to the Greeks and the Roman, particularly in the Romans, you see less and less of that. But it is there. You've got things like Pan with his goat horns, or Serapis with his ram horns. You've got these, Medusa with their snakes in her hair. So it became less and less as we started to idolize man as being the sole omnipotent power and removing animals from the equation. But animals to me have always been sort of like that bridge between, like human beings and a plant. They are a manifestation of nature, and they're some of our best companions. And they also represent our fears, our desires, our needs, depending on what the animal is. So I think that was also a peculiarity that people who might have close animal friends, animals that they treated like humans, pets, that was probably considered very strange to some people back then, especially like the very poor who couldn't possibly, have a dog just to feed it, you know. So it probably seemed a bit strange. So I think it's a mixed bag of chips, but I think really it comes down to the fact that, you know, witches and magical people had spirits that they were working with.
Awesome. Yep. So this is a question I ask everybody that's been on the show, and I love it because I've gotten answers from really, really deep, like heavy philosophical answers to a man that was a police officer who's writing a book about one of the cases that I do a piece in my show. He's shot at people and he's been shot at, and he's afraid of snakes. What is something that Brian Cain, what are you know, it's you deal in magic quite a bit. What is something that you're afraid of? What is spiders? All right, there you go.
I respect spiders, and not all spiders scare me, but I have a little bit of arachnophobia. They creep me out.
Yeah. Well,
especially the rickety ones that are all just like.
Well, you're in the I've never seen bugs like I've seen in New Orleans. Up in northern Colorado, we don't quite have the bugs and the spiders.
Spider is a symbol of the goddess, and I know that intellectually. You know, I know it's a symbol of the goddess. I know they're important, and some spiders don't freak me out, but they freak me out.
That's that wasn't what I expected. I don't know what I expected, but that's funny.
I have a witch. Actually, I guess Levi raises tarantulas.
Oh wow! And you're okay with those, or no?
Once you bring them around me.
Okay, yeah. And you and talk a little bit about Levi. You guys have a show weekly. Is it weekly?
Yes. Well, I mean, we don't always have it, but we try to do it weekly on Friday nights. It's called Covendom. It's like your show. It's on Facebook and on YouTube. We stream live, and you can watch the episodes on Facebook. But people don't think to go look for things on Facebook, so YouTube's useful for that sort of a medium. But our focus is on initiatory witchcraft, so the topics are usually always about that.
Okay. So that's my questions. I've kind of gone through the book. Let's talk about you. One other thing I have here, you dedicate and you answered the question. So it's kind of you dedicate the book to your mother. The first dedication in the book is to your mother, and you said that she took you to your first meeting, your first witch organization. Without looking at it, I don't remember what the exact word was.
My first official one. She didn't go. She just dropped me off.
Okay, and that was I was going to ask. So I was going to ask if witchcraft was a family tradition. And that was at what, 13? You said 15?
I think I was about 15 around that time. Yeah, maybe a little older.
And so what does mom?
Around the time she brought me to that, I was about 17.
Okay, so what does mom say? When you say, "Hey, Mom, there's this meeting of witches,"
She's always been very supportive. I mean, like I said, I started getting into witchcraft when I was about 15, so she was well aware of it. And I was around 17 years old, and I wanted to, you know, I guess meet a witch or work with a witch that knew what they were doing. And in fact, it's one of the women that I also thank in the book, Shawnee Gardner. Was the one who was holding the circle at her house, and my mom had met her previously acquiring some mandrake root for me, which is just a bizarre story, isn't it? And so they had already met, and my mom was comfortable with her, and my mom just gave me a ride to that meeting. Okay. So it was an ode to the fact that she'd always been supportive of my religious choices.
You know, when I was 15, I asked my mom and dad to take me to an Alice Cooper concert, and instead they sent me to church. And so you're lucky that you had a supportive family.
I had a supportive mother. My father was not supportive of witchcraft, but you know, I guess he was outflanked.
Yes, he didn't have a say.
Now, my mother's mother did read playing cards every day, so my mother was sort of accustomed to, I guess, like psychic practices and had a bit of an open mind. Okay.
Well, you talked about your friend that you had when you were younger whose parents had the books. Is he still? Mother, yeah. Is he still in? Is he still in your life? Did he go further with witchcraft? No. Okay. So if you guys have any more questions, hop on. We're gonna let Brian get back to his day.
He needs help.
What's that?
I said he needs help. He's run out of questions.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it is what it is. So you answered most of the questions in your introduction. So
Now I've got something to share with you, though.
Please, I was going to say it's yours. You've got.
You know, one of the most important issues to my heart when speaking about witchcraft to the general public is going back to what I was originally telling you with my first epiphany of witchcraft within Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft, is that we are a goddess priesthood. We have God as well, but the world has a whole lot of God, right? So I think one of the biggest things that we have done is that we are the only caste or priesthood within Western civilization that features prominently a Western goddess. And I think that's really important. I think in the West, we forget that the most disenfranchised human beings on the planet are still women.
Absolutely.
We do focus a lot on, white supremacy, and we focus a lot on, what's going on with like our African American brothers and sisters. Well, no one has it as hard as our African American sisters, and in other places in the world, women have no rights at all. So I think that the fact that we have currently the freedom to be empowering that divine feminine is really important, because I don't think we're really quite there in the West yet either. We still haven't had a female president, have we?
Nope.
So, there's a long way to go still, and we have to be very vigilant about this, because there is an extreme reason why the church is more afraid of a goddess than they are the devil. They always have been. I think they're afraid that the devil might be a goddess.
Yes.
They're very afraid of women, and that shows. And the reason why is because some sort of ancestral memory in their heads of a time when something else was in power, something else was a part of humanity. Mothers are just so much better than fathers in so many ways. So that's what I want to say.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. I think the church has been, I've had this discussion with some friends of mine about how anti-women just the basic Bible is, how anti-woman it is. They created the character of Eve to blame women for the first sin, right? I mean, it's pretty ugly. So what is what's? Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
It's not really a small doubt to me in my mind that you've got something like witchcraft that pairs the goddess, the divine feminine, with magic. Two things that the church wanted to get rid of.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're right.
Two things the church doesn't want to come back, because it's about personal empowerment and complete freedom. And the divine feminine is really that part of ourselves that is nurturing unto itself. It doesn't require the things that patriarchy asks for us, misery and sacrifice and all that sort of thing.
Right. So what does 2020? How has 2020? How has all the bullshit of 2020 affected you as a witch, you as a person, and you as a business person? I mean, we talked about Hexfest, and we talked about.
When me and Miss Val Hughes were in Egypt, we really shouldn't have released the 9 plagues of Egypt. It seems like a good idea.
Oh shit, that's where it came from. All right.
It seemed like a good idea at the time, but we have our regrets.
So how many more do we got to wait for? We got 7 or 8, 6 or 7 more to wait for?
I think that this year's been very weird. I mean, it definitely slowed some things down. It seems to be picking up now on the tail end of things, but I think this is just a matter of humanity persevering something, we've done it before. We've done it a million times. This has got nothing on the Black Death, my friends.
Right.
It's bad. Don't get me wrong. It's bad, but we've seen worse. And, as much as I'm, pro everything that's going on right now, there was never a vaccine for the Black Death. It just is something that we eventually, washed away. So I'm very hopeful that, through just being aware of it, we're working past it in some ways. Unfortunately, not everyone's acting like it's real, and that's just bad leadership. So I think that we've still got a ways to go, but I think it's introspection, isn't it? It's making us look at ourselves, and it's giving people a little bit more time to think whether they want to or not. It's bringing out the worst in people, but it's also bringing out the best in people.
Well, I talked to a friend last night. I spent last night at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park watching a buddy do a show up there, and I got to see a picture. Are you familiar with Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft?
Yes.
But I had dinner with a guy that has a first edition copy of it, and he showed pictures of it. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, and on the drive back down the canyon last night, I was talking about that this may be a nice reset for a lot of people. That this is kind of one of those things where, you know, I've lost over 40 shows, but I've also learned a few new things. You know, one of which is that I have an amazing group of people out in the world, and then friends of friends where I get to meet people like you, and this is maybe turned into something for me. I don't know, but it's kind of a reset and a refocus for a lot of people, and I think that's we needed that. We got a little bit wrapped up, and you know, and maybe it was the gods looking down or looking up or looking sideways and saying, hey, you know, let's refocus. I'm going to hit you a few times and make you refocus. So what does oh yeah. What is 20?
Well, at the very least, Mother Nature's reminding us that she's in charge.
Right. And you know, because the virus doesn't give a shit about politics. They don't give a shit about the economy, and it doesn't give a shit about whether school's open or not. It's there. So we can play politics all we want with this virus. Nature's science and nature. They're going to win. They've won for millions of years.
It just is what it is.
So what is what?
War of the Worlds, how a virus was what killed off the aliens.
Right. So what is in the future for Brian Cain? What is in the future for Hex and Omen? And what does 2021 look like? And what are some projects you've got in the oven right now?
Well, one of the things that we've done, like a lot of smart businesses, is we've shifted some of our projects to being online. Some of them temporarily and some permanently. So we do have a Hex education online classes that you can perpetually. You know, we've got them going on workshops all the time, and if you pay for the workshop, you can watch it anytime you want, and those are really cool. People really like them, and so we're going to continue doing that. We have also started something called WitchCon, which is just going to be an online event, and the idea behind that was even once COVID subsides and we're doing Hex Fest in person, this will be an online thing, a completely separate event. So, kind of learning, since we had to focus on online business on our websites and all that, like how can we keep that going? So I think that's been something a lot of smart businesses have done. But our stores have been open. So far, I don't have any employees who've contracted COVID-19, knock on wood. You know, we're very careful. The readers wear masks. We've got shields. There's hand sanitizer. We limit how many people can go in the store. Masks are required, all that sort of thing. So life is somewhat resumed to normal. I think the only thing it's really going to affect in a big way for us is the ball this year, because I don't think Massachusetts is going to allow gatherings of 600 people by October.
Right. And if I read correctly, you're coming out with a deluxe edition hardcover. Is that right?
Yes. Well, it's not really a deluxe edition. It's just a hardcover.
Okay.
So it's not a revised edition. My book will be about 1 year old in August. So it's going to be a hardback version. I did change one of the pictures because I didn't like it, so I got a new one. But the cover is going to have the Alexandrian rose ink. So it's a blue and gold hardback book with the Alexandrian rose ink. So for those who don't want to see my Bride of Dracula look, it gives you an alternative.
And did you record the audiobook? Or who did?
I did not. In English, I was asked if I wanted to, and that sounded so tedious to me. So we hired a British man who had perfect diction, and I think he sounds great.
Is there who was it that said, some famous author said, everybody has one book, the second book's the hard one. Do you have plans on another book? Are you going to do a follow-up?
I am working on another book very slowly. I'm not in a hurry because I want to really keep promoting this book and make it my bailiwick, because I really believe in this book. In my mind, my next book is going to be easier. Yeah. An author friend of mine laughed at me when I told her this. So we'll see. I said, I think it's going to be easier. And she's like, you're telling yourself that or you wouldn't write it. It's not my goal to be an author, but I think I definitely, I guess I am now, and I have the bug. So I've had an idea for another book, but I'm working on now. So I guess I have two ideas floating in the ether for books. But the next one is also going to be on witchcraft, and I sort of look at it as being like a companion to Initiation Witchcraft.
Okay. Oh, I've been working on my mystery collection book for years. And I got to tell you, anybody that can write a book has my full admiration and respect, because it is hard. It's what I'm struggling with is getting the ideas from here to here, because I know what I'm trying to do, and my book is going to be half theory and stories about performance magic, and then the other half is going to be my routines, where I explain my routines, because I want them in print so that I get credit for them when other people steal them. And so it's hard. Writing a book's hard. You have my full admiration for putting together a book that I thoroughly enjoyed. I really did enjoy it. So
it really, honestly, like I probably wrote the whole book really within 6 months, but the book as an idea was 2 years in the making.
Yeah.
You know.
So, well, I will put the link to the book, and where can people find you? Where can people find information about the classes you offer, and where can people find you? I'll put these links up I'll put them right now.
Yeah, our websites for the stores are hexwitch.com or omensalem.com. Obviously, we have all Facebook pages too for Hex and Omen. I've got Facebook pages. Witchcraft-wise, I also have a British Traditional Witchcraft Facebook page and the New Orleans Coven Facebook page. And then Christian has his group, which is the Warlocks Facebook page.
All right.
So, yeah, there's lots of places you could find us.
My guest a couple weeks ago was Jack Pachuta, who runs mysteriesonthenet.com, and he does online murder mystery parties, and he hosts sessions, and he writes murder mystery parties. And he told us that he had 104 websites for all the different things he did. And I said, well, you need one more, and it's called www.jackswebsites.com, because he just kept spitting them out, and I'm like, I don't know these. I'm not going to remember these. So he had so many. So, all right, Brian, well, if you'll stay on, I'll log off with everybody and stick around. So thanks for coming on. Any parting words, anything, just...
No, that's it. I guess, what I'd say to anybody is that just keep in mind that in this big world that we live in, we walk around on blinders. There are myriads of cultures and people living these like extraordinary lives and almost otherworldly lives going on all around you. You're just not aware of it. Witchcraft to me is not just a religion. It's also a culture. It's my tribe. So it's my way of life. So every day is witchcraft. All the people in my life are witchcraft, except for my friend who's a voodoo priest.
Awesome.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, I did not mention him this week, which is the first week I have not said his name on the show, so I have to give a shout out to my friend Zeke Powers. Zeke had reconstructive knee surgery this week. We used to have a drinking game that every time we brought up that idiot's name, we had to drink, and we didn't do it today. So Zeke, we're thinking about you, buddy. Everybody, take care. Let's see how I get out of this without breaking the system. All right, everybody, take care, be kind, and listen to Bill Hicks.